Welcome, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I know you probably looked at the thumbnail, or at least the title, and were kind of interested, thinking that I'm just going to razz skepticism the entire time. And honestly, I'm not going to do that. In fact, one of the first things that I wanted to do was to actually say how thankful and grateful I am, not only for the skeptics that I know personally, but also for the atheists that I come across. I realized that if you're a skeptic, you're usually an atheist, but if you're an atheist, you're not necessarily a skeptic, at least when it comes to scientific skepticism. I know that there is a difference now. At least I kind of knew that before, but I would just label them as a skeptic still. I would just kind of combine them. But I also wanted to talk about this book that a friend of mine gave to me. I don't know if he really wants me to name him. It's called The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. It's actually along with, I think, a podcast. It's written by Dr. Stephen Novella with Bob Novella, Cara Santa Maria, Jay Novella, and Evan Bernstein. I am very grateful for him sending me this book. I really hope that I can learn some things, really educate myself on these scientific skeptics, what they believe, where they stand, and they will probably have a lot of things that either I agree with or it's just important stuff to know in life in general. And I would say that I probably think I'll agree with 90% of this book right here. But I do say 90%. When I read my Bible, I agree with 100% of it, mainly because I've read it multiple times. Some Christians are still at the maybe 80 or 90% rate because they haven't read the whole thing and they haven't been convinced by its arguments. I know that sounds a little odd, but if you actually read the Bible enough times, you will see its arguments. You'll understand its arguments. I also study, of course, outside of the Bible, but I've been convinced of all of its arguments. But what I'm saying is with this specifically, I would say the majority of it I'm going to agree with. In fact, one of the things that they go into is the faulty nature of our brains, our fallibility, our another way to put it would be our finity, just the limited nature of us as human beings, and also teaches you how to think critically. At least I'm supposing. I can't necessarily say these people are experts, I guess. I mean, someone clearly has some degree, a doctorate, but I can't really say for sure how far that goes. I don't remember exactly what he got it in. I think it was medicine. I only have read the introduction and a little bit of the first chapter. So anything that I say in this video about this, it's not going to be the entire video. It's not going to be the entire book. I need to actually read through the entire thing. In fact, probably I might give a few updates reading through it, just talk about some things that I'm getting from it, and then also some things that I disagree with, because ultimately I really appreciate what skeptics and atheists have done for our society. And I know that sounds weird because actually a lot of atheists have, in a sense, caused a lot of trouble. I mean, just look at England. I know that sounds interesting, but they're partly the reason, and they've admitted this. I know I wouldn't say Charles Dawkins specifically admitted that is the new atheist's fault that Muslims kind of invaded England and have started to take over. Honestly, I really hope that they don't. But that's not to say that, it's mostly their king. He has an interest in them. He is okay with them. So that's probably the main thing. But what it does is that it leaves this gap open for those kinds of things to come in. Atheism, at least new atheism especially, being more evangelistic, really opens up the world to different answers for purpose, because it doesn't actually give purpose in life. Any sincere atheist or philosophical or scientific skeptic will tell you that it doesn't give you ultimate purpose. You can have arbitrary relative purpose, but you can't have a purpose that is beyond the universe itself, because they are materialistic or naturalistic in nature, or I guess humanistic. That's still from a materialistic philosophy, but it's tied. The point is that if you just have the universe and what is contained in the universe, and that is what is essentially the beginning and the end, then there's no purpose outside of that. It's just simple logic. But really what I wanted to do was to start with compliments. And when I say thank you and for what they've done is because they have not only caused myself, but many other Christians to get out of their comfort zone and actually think and to consider what they believe and why they believe it. That's what my entire evangelistic channel, The Gospel Call, has always been about, is to actually think and to consider. And that's even a commandment. One of the greatest commandments is to love the Lord your God with all your mind. And that's extremely important because in anything in life, if your mind isn't in it, then either it won't last long or it's false. And that is just looking at it from that's looking at it from a humanistic perspective. But in a kind of existential worldview perspective, it literally changes society if people are actually thinking critically. Are just for one instance, if people are thinking critically, businesses do well. Like someone who owns a business thinks critically, that business is most likely going to do well because that person is thinking about the important things that are necessary. You know, you still have businesses that do not succeed and the person is an absolute genius, but there's a higher chance for that business to succeed. Now, of course, human beings are not business, but there are some things that relate. So, but I'm getting a little off topic, but I really just want to thank even the friends that I have that have challenged me and caused me to think. It's not that I'm convinced, because I'm not. I'm still a Christian, but I'm a stronger Christian than what I was. Because, I mean... See, that's interesting to say because I still, before, believed completely in, and I say believe completely in because I think that's important, completely in Christianity itself. But I didn't have necessarily the right things to say for every question. I didn't have all of my thoughts organized. I won't ever, no human being is perfect in that sense where they have all of their thoughts organized perfectly. Some older philosophers, of course, will be more on the dot. They will just have a good answer more quickly, but that's because they practice, they have experience, but they won't have everything figured out, right? Because I understand this, I agree with this, that some of the things this book talks about, this one of the things is that we can't know everything. Although I do believe that we can know what truth is. In fact, this is one of the things in the introduction. So I want to find this. So it happens when I don't actually mark stuff, is that I'm going to have to flip through this and actually find it. And I also want to see how let's see. Let's see. You know what? Let me just focus on things I agreed with because I want to do that first. This is one of the things. So this is introduction. This is page 13. No, that's page 17. In the last 2 decades, while we've been fighting for science and reason, it seems like the stakes have only gotten higher. My own profession, medicine, okay, so yeah, I was right, has been thoroughly infiltrated by the pseudoscience of so-called alternative medicine. I don't know exactly what he's referring to there. I'm just not in that area. I mean, whether I'm a doctor or not, I'm just not familiar. The very process of science is under attack. There are entire movements dedicated to denying and opposing the hard-won fruits of scientific discovery. I do actually know that. In fact, Todd White, a false prophet charismatic, is very anti-science, and I completely disagree with him. Not just me, but Mike Winger, who's called him out on some very evil things that he's done. But to continue, and now it seems that truth and facts themselves are easily tossed aside as an inconvenience. There are those who think, with good reason, that humanity is stepping back from the Enlightenment to huddle into an echo chambers of comfortable or at least familiar beliefs. This is a generational struggle, one that will likely never end. Now, I know he's probably a different generation than me. I don't think that's happening with my generation. I do think that there was a space. I think that millennials are kind of in that to a degree. He's probably more familiar with the history of society much better than I am. But I would say, in my opinion, from the people that I've talked to and witnessed, and I've talked to a lot of people, but of course that's in my area. That's not necessarily the entire world. But also from what I've observed, I would say that Generation Z is very truth-seeking, because there's a lot of things that they don't know and understand. There's a lot of things left out. In fact, Generation Z already is the most religious generation for many, many years, many, many decades, or I guess many multiple generations. So in a sense, that's against the scientific skeptics here, but it's really because they're seeking out purpose and they're trying to find answers. And philosophy is at a point now where it really never has been in history, where people are starting to have good discussions about really, really deep things. And the reason is also because of the science that we know today. And I think that we're in a great spot. So in a sense, I disagree with him a little, but I also don't know exactly when he was writing this or exactly what generation he's talking about. I would agree with millennials on that, but I would say that Generation Z is just very different. And I think things are heading in a good direction. But if, he thinks he disagrees because he ultimately thinks that Christianity isn't good for society, he might say it's good for society, but scientific skepticism is better. I think you can be a skeptic and still be a Christian, and I'll get to that. But then we would disagree, because ultimately that's something core to his ideology / worldview, how he sees the world. And that is something that I see. One of the reasons that I believe Christianity is true, one of, not the only one, there are many, but is that it is extremely healthy for societies, and it has just flipped the entire Western world on its head when it just rushed through when Jesus came in. I mean, 2,000 years later, we're still ultimately thanking him and praising his name because of the influence that he had and the freedoms that we have. In fact, these scientific skeptics wouldn't have the freedom or the environment to be such without Christians. That's a large claim, but I think ultimately it's backed up with history. I would say certainly even with the scientific fathers themselves, who were all they all had a Judeo-Christian worldview, not just that everyone had a Christian worldview back then, but that literally the science itself was based off of the idea that God existed and that the universe is orderly because of God's existence, because God is an ultimate mind. And so because of that, he has this degree of intelligence that is unattainable, or even not just unattainable, but also immeasurable. And so therefore the universe is intelligent because it's ultimately from God. I would absolutely 100% agree with that. That is the science that I have learned from everyone. And whether they're secular or conservative history teachers, even though secular ones try to mitigate the Christian influence, the Judeo-Christian worldview influence. There is an immense amount of that. But even so, I really want to talk about skepticism. I keep getting off on these rants. And so this was section 1. This was one of the things, by the way, he's clearly a different generation. I don't know exactly one, but he said, in this section, our guide will load you up with skeptical gear, like a fashionable utility belt. The things that we decided were the most important for the journey. Let's see, what does he say here? Oh, it was before that. Before you start your journey, you need the right equipment. So grab the necessary tools, some trail mix, and a good jacket, and put on a pair of comfortable shoes. I am terribly sorry, but that is just not the kind of stuff that I would be interested in putting on my person or having on my person. I'm not trying to put down this man at all. I'm sure he's a great person. I would like to hang out with him sometime because he does seem very charismatic, but it's just a different generation. I disagree with my dad's clothing as well, but sometimes he does look nice, and I appreciate that. But I'm not a professional, or I'm not really an expert in fashion. What am I saying? I'm a pastor's kid. I don't know anything. Yeah, but let's see. Did I read this? No, I did not. What did I read, actually? Okay, I think it was the quote by Carl Sagan that I really liked. The truth may be puzzling. It may take some time to grapple, or some work to grapple with. It may be counterintuitive. It may contradict deeply held prejudices. It may be consonant with what we... I can't believe I'm mispronouncing. I don't think I am. With what we desperately want to be true, but our preferences do not determine what's true. I 100% agree. Even though I've grown up in Christianity, I don't know why I had it marked there. Oh, I had it marked here. Okay, I did read some stuff. I don't know ultimately why so many Christians, they have this issue. It's like easier for them they have more faith. I'm not the kind of person to have lots and lots of faith. It's difficult for me. It has always been to trust people. I have to actually try at that. Now, usually when I try at something, I try a little too hard. So sometimes I go the opposite and trust people a little too much. But I am naturally skeptical and doubtful, rather, that's the best way to put it, of people, of everything around me. This is just me. I've said this before, and this though comes to one of my problems with skepticism, at least philosophical skepticism, which he points out is not the same as what he's talking about, which is scientific skepticism, or I guess he said it was like the term was invented by Carl Sagan. And that is that you live essentially always doubting. You don't really ultimately believe anything. So I'm guessing just from what I've read here that in scientific skepticism, there are still things that you believe. One of the problems was that he said that science, let's see. Yeah, so here, science works within a philosophy of methodological naturalism. All effects have natural causes, and uses a refined set of methods to check our theories against reality. I don't know if I completely agree with that, but guys, listen to me here before you start ranting in the comment section. I'm not a scientist. I understand that science in general has been that. And I know other people will disagree with me on this. In fact, hopefully I say this in my intro, but you will disagree with probably 90%. I'll agree with 90% of this book, but you'll probably disagree with 90% of what I'm saying in this, even if you are a Christian, because I want to bring up things that are worth thinking about, whether you agree with them or not. But I think that science can prove things that are supernatural, or at least give evidence for. That would be more along the lines of forensic science, but it's still science. Technically, this is the problem. It's because it's not modern science. It's still natural philosophy. But that's the other thing, is that science is natural philosophy. I think that, in my opinion, nature gives evidence for the existence of God, even today. And that, for instance, like the contingency argument, I think that is empirically verified, or rather, there is empirical evidence. I won't say that there is 100% proof or 100% evidence for the existence of God, but I certainly believe that there is more than enough. But that's also for me. But I have probably a little more faith than some other atheists. I don't actually have that much. I really lean more on evidence and what I know rather than what I believe to be true. But with anything that we believe in, whether you're a skeptic or not, you still have ultimately knowledge that you're leaning on. You still have to actually have that knowledge as a basis in order to have faith or belief in the first place. Just like, for instance, if you go out and drive, ultimately you have faith in yourself to drive and also the other people around you to not run into you and to kill you or anyone else that is inside of the vehicle. Instead, you have faith that those people have a desire to protect themselves and to not pay thousands and thousands of dollars to fix your vehicle or replace it. Instead, they care about themselves. You have faith in their selfishness, in their desire to serve themselves, and also in their desire to do good, if in fact that is there. Me personally, I am a Christian. I don't believe that people have a genuine goodwill until they ultimately have the Spirit of God inside of them. But that is a theological, it's technically philosophical, but it's more of a theological debate rather than in this case really what I'm talking about. So what I'm saying is that I think what Dr. Stephen is getting at here is that you can still have faith. There still is faith for what you ultimately believe in, because science says absolutely nothing. It says squat. This is what Frank Turek says all the time. I think he got from his instructor, Norman Geisler, I guess his mentor. Not sure, but he'll say that science doesn't say anything, but scientists do. 100%, because scientists have an idea, an ideology. They have an opinion. They're going to put that onto the science and interpret it. Whether that's true or false, that's really what matters. That's why we have, in modern science, we have falsification. That is a Christian idea, because it assumes that people's brains are faulty. I'm so sorry about that. Forgot to shut my phone off. It assumes that people's brains are faulty because we are finite, we're mortals. That's not an atheistic, materialistic idea. That is something that came from Christians. And it has been one of the best things for science in general, for the entire world in general. When you build something, you test it. When you come up with an idea, you test it. If you don't do that, then you won't really know if it's false. It's literally like not looking in the mirror and thinking your hair's straight after you wake up. Probably your hair's not going to be straight. It could be, but I don't know many people who wake up with like perfect hair. But really, I do agree with this statement as well. We still can't know anything to 100% metaphysical certitude. I think that's certainty, but we can know things. I do agree. We as humans technically can't know something 100%, at least metaphysical certitude. That doesn't sound right, honestly. I wasn't the editor of this book. Maybe that is actually correct English. I would just say certainty. But that statement, are you 100% sure of that? Because that's the thing. That's where faith comes in. That's really where faith comes in. I agree in a sense. You can't know something 100%, but that's why belief is important, because you can be super skeptical of something, or you can not be very skeptical, 99.999% sure. The rest of it is always filled in with faith, or what you would just simply call trust. At the end of the day, I believe that this is true. I believe that this is true. That is something I try to say a lot, like I think or I believe, because I'm trying to be honest, not even necessarily humble. I mean, I do want to be humble, but I'll just say that because I agree that even I myself can't know 100% that I exist, except that I am talking right now. I was able to think that thought. So this is Rene Descartes. He even mentioned this is his point, is that I think, therefore I am. So I know that I exist because I'm able to think. So in that sense, you can know that 100%. So I would say, at least where I'm at currently, I think that there are core ideas about the universe that we can know 100%. We know that we can think. We know that we exist. We know that there are rules for logic. We know that there are rules for nature. But that's when it gets into the system. That's when you ultimately have the system. But the issue is that we are inside of the system. That's another thing. We also know that we are inside of a system. We're contingent. I think that's core, and I think that is 100%, that we are contingent on the system around us. I think that's 100%. Again, I might change my mind as I get older and maybe say, you know what? I don't think we can actually know really anything 100% for sure. Like we as humans, doesn't mean there isn't truth out there that's not 100% certain, as what he would call, I'm trying to find that quote, capital T truth. Because he did say at one point there was no capital T truth. Oh, here it is. Yeah, so this is one of the things I certainly disagree with. There isn't any definitive or ultimate knowledge, but we can grind out knowledge about the world that is sufficiently reliable for us to treat it as provisionally true and act upon it. All right, so I'm just going to put this down for a sec. But this is the difference between a Christian and a skeptic, whether you're scientific or philosophical. I do think philosophical is worse, at least from what he's ultimately telling me. I haven't studied out the differences that much. Again, I just call them skeptics. But I do believe that there is ultimate knowledge, and that is in God. God is the essence. God is the source of knowledge. He is the infinity behind the universe. The only way to get infinite volume in a black hole is to have another infinite as the cause, at least in my opinion. That's my opinion. Okay, oops. And again, I'm not an expert. Don't be throwing stupid comments below and not actually listen to what I have to say. But what I'm ultimately saying is simply this, is that it's just a lot simpler to propose, or I guess posit, an infinite mind behind the universe that has creative power and is personal. It makes complete sense, because that means that minds come from an ultimate mind. That means knowledge comes from ultimate knowledge, right? If you were to say that knowledge ultimately goes down to nothing, it goes down to zero, then you can't trust any knowledge and there is no actual truth, which means that scientific skepticism is something to be skeptical about, and you have to constantly analyze it over and over, and you'll never actually be able to know ever that it is true. If you are able to know something 100% for sure, that is a fact, you won't actually be able to, because there's no such thing as certainty. That concept doesn't exist in the universe if everything's just grounded down to materials, because those materials have no creative power. Chance has no creative power. There is no such thing as nothing creating something, because it's not anything. It doesn't do anything by nature. It won't ever do anything. Nothing will ever come out from it. Nothing will go after it. it's not a simpler explanation than an infinity. It's a stupid one because it's completely rejecting the fact that we have all of these things in the universe. And then we say, what is greater than infinity? 0. No, infinity, guys, infinity. It's the perfect solvent, or not solvent. I'm terribly sorry. It is the perfect answer to the question, where did the universe come from? Why do we have a universe? An ultimate mind that is behind it all, that has personhood and creative power. Because ultimately, mind does have creative power. We create thoughts all the time. And if this mind is so powerful that it can turn those thoughts into physical reality, no problems whatsoever. In fact, you just posit what ultimately we have, right? The, like say, space, matter, time, and energy. And so then you kind of strip away the materials and ultimately give these attributes. This is how ultimately Frank Turek says it all the time, is that we have space, matter, time, and energy that begins. I don't think we necessarily need the beginning for ultimately this to be evidence for God, but say we have the beginning of these things. So then the cause for those coming into existence needs to be immaterial because it didn't exist yet. It needs to be very powerful, if not all powerful, because again, that energy didn't exist yet. And it needs to be spaceless because space did not exist yet, and timeless. Time didn't exist yet. It's ultimately infinity taking 0 and creating something, because this is the great thing about infinity. 0 plus infinity is what? Infinity. Okay, so that means that all things can essentially come from God. No problems there. There's no problem with, it's weird math. It's just kind of how my brain works. Listen, you guys can disagree. This is the wonderful thing about the internet. You guys can completely disagree with all that I just said. I appreciate you guys and when you leave comments, and I appreciate talking to atheists. I usually don't have time to actually get to your comments because it turns into like this whole super long comment war. And so I might just do a video actually just responding to your comments because it's a lot easier and faster. But I also want you to know that, first of all, I'm not an expert on any of this stuff. I am still learning. I am bringing out ideas. That's the purpose of this channel, is to get people to think and to understand. I could be 100% wrong about this stuff, but I'm very excited to read this book and to understand more about skeptics. I disagree with scientific skepticism. Ultimately, at its core, I believe it's false. And I think there's good reason to believe that. It can't prove itself because it believes that there's no ultimate knowledge. So that means ultimately it cannot be known to be true by anything or anyone, and rather everything inside of it is arbitrary. Listen, in geometry, I always go back to geometry for some reason. If you start with a bad idea or a bad proof, you're going to end up with a bad one. It doesn't mean you can't come to correct conclusions at times. You will. With bad math, you can still do that. It's just, it's a lot more likely to come to the correct conclusion. If you start correctly, you will finish correctly. That's the math that we have today, is that we start correctly, we end correctly. Now, of course, there are areas in geometry that people argue over and have debates over. I don't know if you guys know that, but the point I'm trying to make, and of course that has to do with human fallibility and humans disagreeing. The point I'm trying to make is that if you have a worldview and it doesn't have actual genuine truth in it, then it, by nature, by itself, by its own standard, cannot be true. It's that simple. And you might say, well, it also can't be false because there's no opposite to it. So it's improvable and it's unfalsifiable. That's, to me, nothing worth believing in. I love skepticism to a degree. I think that, and this is what I'm getting at here, I think Christians can be skeptics. I think Christians should be skeptics. I think every human being on the face of this planet should be a skeptic, but not to the degree of what he's talking about, or I guess they're talking about, or even what other skeptics talk about. I think just critical thinking and doubting and actually trying to seek for genuine answers and looking for empirical answers as often as possible. Not that anyone actually lives their life like that, because we do not. We might with our beliefs to a degree, but we certainly wouldn't do that with driving. We're not going to take the hours to study all the traffic patterns and weigh the chances of if we're going to die or not when we go out driving. No one does that. I think there are actually people that do that. I know for a fact that road safety in America, I think it's the NTHB or NTBS. Of course, that's their job. But no one in their normal life is going to do this. Or instance, fly in a plane, and of course there are people completely afraid of it, right? But they won't necessarily study that until it becomes inconvenient, which in a sense is not actually a good thing. It's always good to be a better studyman. It's always good to understand why driving is dangerous, actually is extremely dangerous, and why flying is so much safer. I just recently applied to take an exam. I went through this entire course to get my to take my UAG, which is Unmanned Aircraft General, and I'm getting my Unmanned Aircraft Pilot license under Part 107 in the CTF, I think it's, or CTR 14 of FA's, I think it's that, but I just know it's Part 107. If I'm getting this wrong, and then like someone from the Pilot Institute, probably won't happen, watches this and like, this guy, what? He didn't really study this. He has no idea, but trust me, I know that I'm hopefully going to pass this exam. But I learned about how ridiculously regulated even flying a drone is. And from someone I've been talking to at work who is hopefully going to be doing air traffic control for the government, flying an airplane is extremely safe because it's so regulated. And you can even just simply go onto Google and look at multiple different studies about how airplanes have a much lower risk of death. And that was one of the other things he said, not just Google. He was like referring to Google. I agree. You shouldn't just go to Google for stuff. You should actually try to read books and go out, talk to people for yourself. I think interviewing people is one amazing way to get knowledge and information, not just about the person, but just about the world in general. Of course, you have to do lots and lots of people, but that's why other people have done that. That's why I think YouTube is a great source as well for finding that knowledge and information. It's probably why these guys use it. I'm sure they're on YouTube. But hey, you guys, again, try to leave those comments. It's not that I don't want the comments. I do. I just don't want you guys to do it out of ignorance or stupidity. Not that I'm saying any one of you is stupid or ignorant, but I don't want you to do something based on just one little thing that I said, one little snippet, and take it out of context. Try to understand where I'm coming from. And I hope that this meets you well. You guys think about some of the things that I said. I hope to continue reading this book and learning more things. I said that already multiple times, and I really mean it. And I want to continue to grow and understand skeptics even more. Because again, 90% of the time, I'm going to agree with their worldview, but that 10% is mostly in the core. That's what I'm going to disagree with. Now, I will say when I talk to an atheist or a skeptic, mainly because they're usually against my Christian ideology or worldview, I'm going to disagree with about 100% of what they say. Not actually. I think we might both disagree to that degree. Not 100% for sure. I have talked to quite a few skeptics and atheists where I do end up agreeing actually with a lot of what they say. What they stand for is a little different. because some people do it out of spite, some people do it out of anger, some people do it out of selfishness, some people do it out of pride, some people do it out of ignorance. Ignorance is not a sin. I hope everyone knows that. That's not what I'm saying. But guys, thank you so much again for tuning in. God bless you all and have an amazing day. Hello, everyone. My name is Samuel David Spoonhour. I'm very honored to have you today. I am kind of welcoming you to the Samuel Spoonhour channel. This is really just me giving out philosophy. I'm not a professional at all. I've just learned some things from other Christians, atheists, and just different philosophers, and also especially reading my Bible. That's taught me a lot. But this is not directly associated with the Gospel Call or with First Baptist Church. It is technically collaborative, so it is connected in a way. But if I say anything that is different theologically or philosophically than, say, my dad when he is preaching, or my brother when he is preaching, or any of our guest preachers, or anything that I say or anyone else says on the Gospel Call, it's of no effect. This is more or less independent in terms of ideology, philosophy, and theology. The whole point of this is really to give people something to think about. I am just doing this kind of uncut. If you find these videos entertaining, I am very, very grateful. That's kind of the purpose of this. I'm just going to give you some thoughts that I had on my mind. Hopefully it'll be just about a half an hour each video. And you guys leave some comments down below. If you agree or disagree, I promise you will probably disagree 90% of the time. But I can't promise you I'll actually get to all of those agreements or disagreements. So have some patience with me. I'm just trying to get some videos out consistently. This is supposed to be like a weekly post. I hope that you all enjoy.